Thank you so much for the opportunity for us to be able to speak today. Over the next 30 minutes, my colleague, Dr. Tamiko MaGee-Rodgers, and I are going to be sharing our thoughts about clinical trial recruitment strategies, in particular for early stage startups, with a focus on research reaching diverse populations. So after much conversation, Tamiko and I decided that the most important strategy of all that we would like to discuss is proper planning from the time a trial is conceptualized through its completion. So strategic planning is critical to successful outcomes. And I am sure, let's see, it didn't move here. There we go. I am sure that the owner of this house wishes that the contractor did a little more planning before its completion of the garage. You see it? All right, there are 6 areas, there we go, that we'll focus on. I will tackle the first 3, and Dr. Rodgers will take on the second set. So let's get started here. So enrollment planning. Enrollment planning involves both a strong recruitment plan and a data-driven approach to the selection of your trial participants. And for this reason, I'm going to spend slightly more time on this topic than the next 2 that I'll address. According to a national survey conducted with 44 clinical trial sites that focus specifically on translational research, having an a priori quality recruitment plan is the most important factor to successful clinical study recruitment. The second most important factor, which I didn't highlight but is up there, is ensuring the feasibility of this recruitment plan. Developing a recruitment plan early and with stakeholder input is imperative to our successful recruitment. How to do this is not a simple answer, so I'm not going to try to go into it today, but I am strongly recommending you to take a look at the website here provided by the Clinical Trials Transformation Initiative. And they provide a framework and key steps for strategic planning to assist investigators in conducting their clinical trials. They have a lot of resources on this, and I think these slides are made available too. For all of us, our goal is to practice good science. And to do so, we have to ensure that research participants in our study match the people who are most burdened with the disease. From the perspective of the National Institute on Aging, from where I work, poorly representative trials simply will not be funded moving forward. In a blog that was released last year by Dr. Richard Hodis, our director of NIA, and Dr. Amy Kelly, our deputy director, they reiterated the Institute's policy that we will only prioritize those funding requests that demonstrate representation of the population affected by the disease. The requirements for diversity can also be found external to the NIH. The New England Journal of Medicine has a policy as of 2021 that its authors of research studies must provide a supplementary table that provides data on the representativeness of the study sample. Authors must discuss this table and the generalizability of the research in the findings of their paper in order to be published. A new guideline by the Food and Drug Administration will soon be requiring diversity action plans from sponsors conducting clinical studies involving drugs, biological products, and devices. The FDA's expectations reinforce the need for proper planning prior to conducting a trial in order to increase the applicability of trial results to patients that are affected by the disease. So in sum, proper planning for diversity is now an expectation of the funders, the regulators, and medical professionals. Diversity is also important because disparities are great. The National Institutes of Health have identified 9 populations that are priorities for inclusion and who are traditionally underrepresented in clinical research. As you can see on the screen here, it's 4 races: Latino, Hispanics, those in rural populations, those who are socioeconomically disadvantaged, sex and gender minorities, and those with disabilities. Diversity is with respect to Alzheimer's and related dementias, African American and Hispanic populations are at greater risk for the diseases. As this table shows, the prevalence rate of clinical AD for overall population is 11.3%. However, it jumps to 14% for Hispanics and 18.6% for African Americans. And these disparities grow even larger as the population ages, with almost 20 to 44% of Hispanics and 25 to 50% of African Americans having clinical AD after the age of 75. In this slide, dementia incident rates within the Veterans Health Administration are depicted across their regions. Similar to the last slide, whites have the lowest incident rates across all groups, but what this figure shows us is the importance of looking at potential differences geographically when planning the trial population. Your decisions on sample size and site selection, for example, would differ if you were recruiting in Region B, which is the Mid-Atlantic, versus Region F, the Texas area. So moving on, eligibility criteria and their impact on diversity within clinical trials is very key. Eligibility requirements, as we all know, must be met for individuals in order to be able to participate in a clinical trial. They're integral to the clinical trials as they assist in defining the population being studied, and they help ensure participant safety. They also help minimize factors that are going to otherwise confound your understanding of your study results. But if they're properly designed, they can also help in recruiting participants that represent the population of interest that you are looking for. The challenge, however, is striking the balance between maximizing the inclusivity and safeguarding the trial's safety and interpretation. As the investigator, you will be responsible for the selection of your study's eligibility criteria. And the most important goal from my perspective, is to develop criteria that are both comprehensive and selective. Their logic should be clear and allow your enrolling PIs to accurately determine if a participant is eligible or not. And each criterion should also be a discrete clinical concept and not lumping multiple items together. So here are some examples of things that are both comprehensive and selective, and you can see how they're very precise and you know what you would do, how to answer those. There are, however, key pitfalls when developing your eligibility criteria. These are listed on the slide here, but really they can be summarized as unclear, confusing, and too stringent. As well, many criteria also have the potential to disproportionately exclude already underrepresented populations through things, for example, such as diabetes, depression, or requirements to have a study partner participate. All of these negatively impact representation. Here's some examples of ones that don't work well because they're too unclear. Recently at NIA, we published an article analyzing the eligibility criteria for 196 NIA-sponsored ADRD clinical trials funded between 2018 and 2023. Today I'm only going to focus on a few findings. The citation is listed there as well. You can look it up, and there's more in there. But first, there were 128 distinct categories of exclusion criteria found across the near 200 trials. This table shows the ranking of the top 10. And as you can see, interestingly, age ranked the #1 exclusion criteria found across Alzheimer's and dementia trials and aging disease, with nearly 90% of trials having an age requirement as part of their exclusion criteria. Second on the slide, during the coding process, several exclusion criteria were determined as unclear and nebulous with potential for subjective interpretation. We categorized and measured so we could measure their prevalence. So 3 of these categories were so prevalent they made the top 10 list. So 49 to 59% of trials have exclusion criteria that are confusing or with unclear logic within our funded trials. And finally, 16 of the exclusion categories were identified as disproportionately likely to exclude racially and ethnically diverse persons in Alzheimer's clinical trials. 16 may not sound like a lot, but 88% of the near 200 trials contain at least one of these 16 criteria, and 28% of the trials contain 5 or more of these criteria. So the odds of diversity go down substantially for at least a quarter of our trials based on eligibility criteria alone. Findings from this study has led to a recent policy change within NIA. NIA now requires that clinical trial grant applications must provide clear rationale supporting their proposed eligibility criteria, and that these eligibility criteria are to be representative of the population affected by the disease and address underrepresented populations. So again, we no longer will fund trials that poorly plan for representation. Lastly, I want to briefly address the value of monitoring and evaluation in ensuring diversity across our clinical trials. I can't stress enough how important it is to touch base and test assumptions at each stage of your clinical research. Starting early on with information that can inform your trial planning, tracking and monitoring the progress of your trial to ensure it's being implemented as you intended, and at the end of your trial, you should focus on your outcomes, documenting your effectiveness and how you can inform future trials, particularly if you had a successful trial and you're moving on to the next phase. At the early stages, before you're knee-deep into the trial, formative evaluation is really critical to help you plan your study outcomes and identify those strategies that will have the greatest impact. As well, it's always incredibly helpful, and we often require in our grant applications for R1s to conduct a small pilot of your study to assess and reduce the burden, determine power, and measure impact of recruitment strategies before you scale up. In this final slide, I just want to emphasize the important process of monitoring trial performance against your trial metrics. Are you enrolling at the rate that you planned? If no, why not? You need to explore it so you can course correct. Are you meeting your planned enrollment for all your populations, or are you just enrolling one population group, such as white not Hispanics, which is the pattern that we see? In sum, monitoring and evaluation will help to ensure your trial is feasible from the start, that it stays on track or is course corrected early on, and that you balance the resources, because you're not going to get any more, to address your trial goals. So thank you for your time, and I'm going to now hand it off to my colleague, Dr. Tamiko MaGee-Rodgers. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Holly, and thank you so much for having me today. I'm so excited to be here. As Holly said, I work for the Global Alzheimer's Platform Foundation. Just to give you just a little bit of information about the Global Alzheimer's Platform Foundation, we are a patient-centric nonprofit, and in 2022, I led the launch of our Inclusive Research Initiative, which is focused on improving representation in AD clinical trials and supporting over our 90 sites that are within our network. So, what makes a successful site, right? That's the million-dollar question. So as you can see here, I have included an overview of tools that can help in finding where are those locations and populations of interest, right? As you can see here, in one of the first figures, this is a CMS map of where Medicare fee-for-service beneficiaries are located and where diagnoses of Alzheimer's disease are relative to the region. And as you can see here in the middle figure is Us Against Alzheimer's. They have the NADAX, which is an index of where Alzheimer's disease regions are, and we're based on CMS data, right? And then as well, census data. That's so important. That's one of the main things that we use when we're working with sites. Where are sites located relative to the underrepresented communities, right? It's important to know that. We can't assume that, okay, we live in this bubble, we're in this site, and there's no one within a 30-mile radius, right? We have to be open and intentional about working with diverse communities. So these are great tools to refer to and use as they, again, just provide the population of interest that you're looking for, right? Selection process and areas of focus. So the site selection process is very important. Just to let you all know, we work, like I said, with sponsors and pharma, and they come to us asking us about what sites should we consider, right? And as far as sites, you have to be prepared, right? Site preparation is so important, right? As far as site locations, like I said, there may be locations where you're not in a diverse area, right? But you just have to be intentional. If you're gonna have a study, you have to make sure you're intentional to be diverse. You may have a site that's not in a diverse area, but make sure you match it with a site that is in a diverse area, right? So you have a balance. Site goals and monitoring performance. So you have to have an understanding what those goals are, right? Just for instance, just to let you know, we've worked with studies and sponsors and pharma that have given us goals, right? We are looking for 10% from African American, 10 to be enrolled into the study, 10% from Hispanic, Latino, 1% from Native American. So you have to understand what those goals are and how you're gonna obtain those goals. What are the tactics your site is gonna utilize to obtain those goals? And then appropriate staff and chain of command. We have to understand that when we're building a site. So I'm gonna let you all know, we actually opened a site about 2 years ago in the Rio Grande City, Texas area. That area actually has a high prevalence of Alzheimer's disease, but it is 98% Hispanic Latino population. And they really needed to have some form of access to clinical trials. So we helped open the site and launch the site. And we had to help them from finding the research assistant all the way to the PI, right? So you have to understand what is needed to launch a site. Some people don't realize all that is involved with launching an Alzheimer's disease clinical research site, and it takes time. But it's important that we do offer resources and we open sites that are in diverse areas instead of just focusing on the typical areas that we usually, right? Because we have to ensure that the treatment or drug works for all and not just one population. So I want to give you just a little bit of information about our BioHarmony study. This was our first sponsored study from the Global Alzheimer's Platform Foundation, where we were intentional in our site selection process. So our whole goal with the BioHarmony study, it's a biomarker study, so it's not interventional. And when we opened the study, in our protocol, one of our objectives was to enroll at least 20% from underrepresented populations. We weren't going to close the study until we reached that. And I would say, I'm happy to report we did. We surpassed that and enrolled 24% from underrepresented populations. And again, we were intentional. We were intentional about the sites we selected. We have sites in Florida, in Miami area, in Orlando area, being in those diverse areas, Detroit, Chicago, right? And we provided our sites with resources to be able to recruit. So it does take some planning. We worked with Black-owned newspapers, Hispanic-owned newspapers, and we did radio station interviews in those communities. You have to go where they're at. You have to meet them where they're at. You can't wait for them to come to you. So we were very intentional about that. But as you can see, we had various procedures where we had amyloid PET, we had MRI, we had ApoE, genetic testing, and we had retinal imaging tests. But just to let you know, we actually have our BioHarmonies 2 study in progress right now. And we're excited about that. For BioHarmonies 1, we were at 17 sites. For BioHarmonies 2, we're at 30. So we're expanding. And our goal for underrepresented populations has increased from 20% to 25 to 30%. So it's always good if you have another study, like a part 2, always increase that goal, right? Okay, communication. Communication is so important. That's one of the key words, right, for having a successful study, because you have to communicate. What is it in for the participant, right? The participant wants to know what's in it for them, right? Not what's in it for you or the researcher. It's all about them. So we've heard that a lot of participants want to know, what were the results, or how is the study progressing? Can you share anything with me as I'm in the study? Especially communities from underrepresented populations, it's a lot for them to even get involved in a study, let alone, retain. Retention is so important. So one way is just to make sure you communicate to them what's in it for them, right? Making sure they understand the whole informed consent process as well. Potential participants will do their own homework. We've seen it, right? We have the internet. They will search and they will look and they will already come in with some information. So you just have to know that they're going to do their own homework. And having necessary tools well tested that are user-friendly and accessible to the population of interest is very critical. You have to have tools, right? You have to ensure that the materials you create for the study are culturally competent, right? That participants see themselves in those materials, right? They don't just see one population. They can see, oh, I see someone from my community is on this recruitment, right, flyer. And this is something maybe I could be interested in. Communication resources with accessible language, that's very important. One thing I see, and I will share, the service is, I see a lot of studies get started, and then after the fact, it's an afterthought, let's do it in Spanish. And it's like, how many people did we lost to, right? The enrollment window, right? And I see it 6 months and even a year after. So it's so important to make sure you have the language available in the flyer of the population in the region that you're in as well. And then testing materials, including the protocol. I think is very important, just to test to see if the protocol is actually not excluding for underrepresented populations. We see that a lot. I know there's a lot of projects we've been working on, and we've seen a lot of screen failure rates for underrepresented populations because of comorbidities. But is there any way to, make it less exclusive and more inclusive? And ensuring a mix of avenues of communication appropriate for populations. So we also have to understand, the Hispanic, Latino populations, right? We have found, especially in the Rio Grande City, Texas area, they listen to radio. So if you want to talk about your study and just have, provide more awareness and education, radio might be an avenue for them, right? And then also just ensuring what different communication tactics you have are, again, culturally competent for the populations you're trying to serve. As you can see here, there's some communication tools and resources I would like to share. Outreach Pro with NIA, which is a great tool that our sites utilize to ensure that their recruitment materials are conducive for the population that they're trying to serve and recruit for their study. So the awesome thing about Outreach Pro, and I love to just talk about it, is it's available in various languages. And I know right now, I think Mandarin, right? I know, which is awesome, right? And you can select photos and images of people from the community you're trying to serve and create your own recruitment material. So I love that. And then the ADOR, the Alzheimer's Dementia Outreach Recruitment and Engagement Resource, it has a bunch of resources as far as, if you're looking to work with certain communities, you're trying to improve your recruitment in a particular trial, this is a great resource to consider, as well as Us Against Alzheimer's. They have a communication brain health message guide with Latino and African American communities and how messaging, right, may be different from non-white Hispanic communities. So these are some great tools to consider when trying to improve representation and as you're focused on some of those diverse communities as we discussed. Community engagement. Just want to highlight here that think about creating a community advisory committee. One thing that we have done is we have created local, regional guidance committees with local stakeholders. That's people actually from the community, right? We're looking at making the community advisory committee diverse, ensuring that you have various perspectives on that committee because they can help inform what the recruitment process should look like. What should your materials look like? So they can be a resource to have. So I really recommend creating a community advisory committee and ensuring good community outreach and mapping of resources and partners. So that's one thing that we do with the Global Alzheimer's Platform Foundation is we do community mapping. we help sites understand where they are and where are community partners relative to where they're located, and diverse community partners. And I'll share an example on the next slide, what that looks like. And identifying in advance and developing relationship referral process to sites, right? One thing we like to do is connect with diverse HCPs and PCPs. They are seeing diverse patients because they are, in diverse areas or themselves are diverse. So looking at them and working with them and developing relationships that they can serve as a referral, right? Potential referral resource into this study. And then partnering with local providers and community engaged organizations. This is so important. Just for example, some of our community connectors that I lead a team of community connectors that are located across the United States. One example they came up with is, why don't you join the local Chamber of Commerce and the local Black Chamber of Commerce and the local Hispanic Chamber of Commerce? And that has resulted in really great relationships with community partners in the area. So that's one example. Just be intentional about who you're reaching out to and developing relationships with. And this is just an example of the community mapping that we've done. As you can see, this is an example of Orlando. We looked at city demographics, target region demographics, and also 5 community partner types, including media, faith-based organizations, and community-based organizations, as well as government. So we actually provide this to our sites so they can have a tool to refer to when they're doing recruitment for a study. And then just finally, if you have access to a mobile research unit, that's one of the things that we had. We found it very fruitful and very, it was a successful run with the mobile research unit because we were able to provide access to those in underserved and rural areas. Just to let you know, of all the people that were screened on our mobile unit, 50% came from underrepresented populations. And on this mobile unit, we were able to do blood draws and memory assessments as a pre-screener into a protocol. So we're excited, and we were intentional. As you can see, our mobile research units coordinators are diverse and bilingual in Spanish and Haitian Creole. So thank you so much, and I appreciate your time.
Feel free to use the microphone in the middle to ask any questions. And our virtual audience, please use the chat function.
I thought we were going to get chairs. So we're open for questions for anyone who may have them.
I have
Yes.
a question. Do I need a microphone? Probably.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys. Hi, guys. So it was super cool presentation from both of you, so thank you. I was very excited to see that NIH is thinking about including clinical trial design in the review process. Are reviewers trained to see that?
So one step at a time. So, yes, I mean, the reviewers are.
I should know because I'm a reviewer sometimes.
Yeah. So reviewers come, from the research environment, and so they do know. And we are definitely working on ways to make sure that that they're aware and applying the process, that the expectations in the review process. So. And really, the policies are made very clear as well. We've got a few more actual policies that are for anything over 500,000 or more a year that the same inclusion policies apply to. So they take it very seriously. Our data have been demonstrating we need to improve, and things are starting to improve, I think.
Hi, thank you very much. Amy Ripka, I'm a CEO at a biotech, Lucy Therapeutics, here in the area. I couldn't help but notice there were 2 women talking to me about diversity in clinical trials. So my question is, there's enormous pressure on biotechs. There are very few women CEOs. They're mostly male CEOs. VC community is even worse. So they want us to run trials as quickly as possible,
Right,
with the least money as possible. So my question to you is how those are the stakeholders that need to move the needle eventually, right? I mean, I understand we can do stuff from the ground up, but how are you thinking of addressing kind of the top-down approach to get people to really buy into the importance of this?
I think we both have perspectives on there. From a government point of view, the funding is behind it. And the applications that come in are now being scrutinized in ways that it really can't make it past that first step without having those things addressed. So from my point of view, it's more the stick versus the carrot. But I know you guys have your, I mean, you demanded this of BioHermes, for example.
Right,
So.
we demanded it of BioHermes. And the nice thing about working with pharma is we have a president who doesn't back down, and he pushes them and said, hey, wait, you want us to work with you, but it's just not lining up, right? Because we tend to work with, like I said, pharma, and all the time, it's really not diverse groups we work with, not at all. So we, push them and advocate for more diversity, like you said, from the lower level all the way up to the C-suite. Yep.
And I can tell you that I really strongly believe this because I see the data every day, is that trials that don't plan properly, that don't take the money up front and invest in that, which we allow for in our grant applications, they do poorly at the end. They think they're going to start after a year, and it takes them 2.5 years to start. Then they start enrolling. They aren't paying attention to what they are committed to do, which is their plan inclusion table. And then what happens is now they're in no-cost extensions and so on. And so they keep kicking the can because if they just invested properly in it up front, they wouldn't be in that spot. And I've seen this, I worked at the National Cancer Institute for 15 years. Same thing happened. Same thing is happening with our data. The more you plan for it and invest that up front, the better off you are down the line. So that would be my
I
suggestion.
applaud the stick approach, though.
Yeah.
Because I think the carrot has not really worked very well. So I think
No, the carrot doesn't work.
Yeah,
Right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, Christian Morescu. I'm from Visual Neuroscience. This is a question to Tamiko I first off applaud you and your organization for all the outreach. I was wondering, as part of the process of engaging with underrepresented communities, as we look forward to genetic testing becoming more and more a part of, a subpopulation or segmentation of trials or endpoints, I wonder what you're bringing back through engaging with these populations on potential hesitancies to specifically genetic testing.
Yes, we hear that a lot. And just to let you know, I actually still do events, and I want to be out in the public and just hear from them, what are those hesitations? I even get people, I'm not going to do a blood draw. No. And it's all about awareness and education. What we found is you just have to provide education, right, about what the importance and what is behind us doing the APOE genetic testing. And if they have an understanding of that, then that reluctancy kind of goes away. But if we're just like, hey, come in, let's just do this, and they don't know what they're doing, yes, there is hesitancy. So we've been able to get out there, especially with BioHermes. We are trying to lay the foundation because we do have that genetic testing. And like I said, we've had 24% from underrepresented populations join the study. So I think you just have to provide that awareness and education first.
And to piggyback on that is the data are very clear. No matter what the disease is, that it is a fallacy that people from diverse populations are less likely to participate in a clinical trial.
Right.
That is not true.
Right.
They're just not offered the opportunity. And they're not offered the opportunity because trials are often in locations where they don't live. And so if you start making these connections and offer, and exactly as Tamiko said, educate and inform about it, they will be just as likely as the well-served population of white not Hispanics.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, quick question. Some of the underserved populations that you're trying to target, they have, due to our healthcare system that we're presently existing under, they have more untreated or poorly treated comorbidities. I design and conduct clinical trials, and variability is my enemy, okay? And so if I look at Alzheimer's disease trial, for example, if I'm looking at disease progression, those are 18-month studies. So if I, for example, enroll very old patients, they may have events that lead them to die that have nothing to do with Alzheimer's disease, or that they have comorbidities, they may cause complications and variants. Have any studies been done on the variability that is induced by or included or comes at the consequence of enrolling a more diverse group of patients. Because, traditionally we try to be very narrow in our criterion, and I agree, it doesn't represent the eventual population we're trying to treat. But on the other hand, if we enroll a very hypervariable population, it's almost impossible to get a positive clinical trial. So.
I can tell you that they're working on it. It's not an easy solution, I would agree. And but the truth is that half of our population just taking obesity, or overweight or obese, and so. And which then becomes, leads to other diseases, diabetes, which, they say is the second form of Alzheimer's. And it is hard. And I think there just has to be investment in that. And I don't have the solution. We are looking at the eligibility criteria much more strongly, though. And they have to make a strong justification for it.
And if I can mention for Bio-Hermes, hypertension and diabetes are usually an exclusion, but we say if it's controllable, if you can come back, we give the participant the opportunity to kind of get it under control and come back and revisit being in the study.
That's great. Yeah.
Thank you both very much.
Sorry, we will have the last question from Dr. Hoffman.
Great. Beth Hoffman, Origami Therapeutics. Thanks very much to both of you. My question kind of piggybacks on the couple before me, and that is about when we go after specifically genetically defined populations. ApoE is one, but tau mutations are another, and things of that nature. I guess are you planning forward in how to help people think about powering the trials adequately to meet the diversity of the population? And in some respects, I'm thinking how do you look at responders and non-responders to help you really make the most out of the data you collect?
You want to take that? So the answer is yes. We have now put more resources at helping both our program staff and working with grantees in terms of ensuring that the power is there for those. So that the simple answer is yes. It's just now starting to put into play for the oversight of that more carefully.
And just one thing too, as we work with sponsors and pharma, we continually monitor the data throughout, and we can let them know and provide that real-time feedback. If they need a pivot, consider, looking at different, like you said, areas or, providing an amendment, and they listen to us. So I think that's one way as well.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.